Welcome back, AI Curious Folk, AI Ramblings podcast daily. This is episode 90. I mistakenly called yesterday's episode 90, but it was only 89. I was jumping the gun. It's Thursday. I'm Michael Parekh, your human AI guide. A lot going on. Let's get started. What I want to discuss today is we have an AI tech wave that is distinctly seeing its when it rains, it's pour moment. It's particularly true around three separate areas that are unconnected that I want to talk about, and they're worth highlighting. Number one is AI coder productivity and some of the unintended consequences of that I think are important for folks like you, AI curious folk, to understand at a high level. Second is AI forward deployed engineers. This is a hot new thing and in AI land, and it's actually close to a cool old thing, which I want to talk about. And number three, big tech stock comp taxes. And this is, again, arcane topic. Don't switch away, but it's important because it gives you a sense of the scale of the AI investments that are going on that need to be thought through. And we'll go into the details. So I'll go through the events and then go through my take on each. First, let's talk about the coders being too productive with AI coding, causing computing overloads. What's going on? And OpenAI particularly was an example of this as an article that kind of walked through this in detail, which I'll have in the show notes. But their coders were finding that all of a sudden their productivity for coding went up 2x, 3x or more. And so all of a sudden they were doing their regular work on all the code base at OpenAI, which happens to be very complex. And now all of a sudden, instead of bringing the updates into their internal and external systems, I call it once or twice a week. Now it's multiples of that, which means interruptions to customers and internal users and to external customers. So now all of a sudden you have to manage a whole array of product updates that the coders are doing just because they're doing their job better because they're augmented by the AI, and it's overloading the systems. It's causing some new sets of issues in terms of programming around all this. And so it is an issue. Now, it's true for OpenAI. The reason I'm highlighting it today as an event in terms of when it rains, it pours, is that this is going to be true of every company, large, medium, and small, in the next 2 or 3 years, as they use AI technologies to update their systems, their developers, their internal and external people who are managing their code bases. This is going to be a phenomenon that has not been yet thought through in its implications. It's an important one, particularly for mainstream users, that now when you're using your favorite product or service, whether it's for work or business, all of a sudden you see things are a little slower, etc. It's not just because there may not be enough AI compute for you on your current plan. I talked about the shift from all you can eat to a la carte pricing. Not just that, but it could just very well be that the coders at the company that you're using their product and their app and their website at is just uploading all kinds of updates and it's slowing things down. So that is item number one. Now, item number two are forward deployed engineers, FDEs. And I've written a lot about this. This is a thing that became very popular by the hot company Palantir on the defense side. It's now become a thing across the Silicon Valley and tech engineers, AI engineers. Everyone's got FDEs. In fact, OpenAI and Anthropic have now created multi-billion-dollar partnerships with consulting companies and private equity, raising billions of dollars to basically flood the enterprise zone at their customers with forward-deployed engineers who can help their customers figure out what to do with all these new AI technologies, how to implement it, how to actually deploy it up and down and maintain it at scale. So it's a big new thing. It's a fancy buzzword. A lot of the people who are doing the forward deployment engineering are better paid than other people in tech and at these same companies. So it's a thing. But what I wanted to point out in terms of my take on this is basically the AI buzzy version of something that's been true in IT services in enterprises for decades. In fact, IT services, software and services, is a multi-trillion-dollar global industry. A lot of it, was taken over by India in the 90s in terms of all the outsourcing trends. And so the forward deployment engineer it's an important phenomenon right now when a lot of the AI technologies are being reinvented on a bottom-up basis, but this stuff will normalize. This stuff will become more par for the course for the companies, and basically it'll be forward deployed AI services, software and services. So this stuff will get normalized. It's a buzzy thing right now. Everyone's focused on it. Everyone's trying to hire these people, train these people, and deploy these people at their best customers, and it's a thing. So again, another one of these, when it rains, it pours. How do you deploy these people at scale? How do you manage them, etc.? Number three, I wanted to talk about, and here again, there's an article, in this case, Google Alphabet. They just raised $80+ billion in stock secondaries, which is about equal to what Elon wants to raise for his SpaceX $1.75 trillion offering. I talked about it yesterday. But of the 80 billion, they just raised about almost half of that already. Basically, about that, 40 billion is going to go to what they call stock-based tax compensation. Basically, this is an arcane thing that, in Silicon Valley, most of the employees get their salaries plus stock-based compensation. The taxes have to be paid on this, and typically the tech companies pay the taxes. They deduct it from the vested shares of the employees, and then they pay the taxes to the government. So it's big cash inflows to the IRS, which is a good thing for the government functioning, etc. But the numbers are big, and these numbers have always been big, but they're particularly big in this AI tech wave. They're big because we have a bull market. The stocks are higher, so there's bigger numbers. So it's going to be $30-40 billion in the case of Google Alphabet alone. If you take it across all the big tech companies, we're talking about numbers that are close to 200 billion. Not that far from what each of these companies is spending per year on the AI data center capex. So we're thinking about AI investment just in terms of AI data center investments and power, but we should also be thinking about stock compensation for employees. And that is what this trend is pointing to. It's always been a thing, and it will remain a thing. The other issue, which I'm not going to talk about today, is stock-based compensation, especially how do you account for it in GAAP, which is accounting standards, and non-GAAP mechanisms. And currently Wall Street has a habit very different from my day when I used to run Goldman's internet research in the 90s, where non-GAAP accounting is used for stock-based compensation, which again runs in the hundreds of billions for the industry as a whole. And that, I think, is a less conservative way to value these companies. And that's an issue that I have that I'll talk about separately in a separate post or podcast. But it's a related issue to this. It's very unique in the context of the tech industry because it has more of its compensation for its top people, and actually most people using stock-based compensation versus other industries. So it's a germane issue, especially as valuations tend to creep up in a bull market, which is what we're seeing, especially ahead of 3 big mega AI IPOs. And so we'll see where that goes. But that is the other, when it rains, it pours kind of issue. So again, 3 separate things that I've talked about. One is the AI coding causing the computer overloads. And number 2 is the forward deployment engineers becoming all the rage. And the third is this booming stock compensation taxes in a bull market, which in many ways the numbers are competing with the AI data center cap investments. So those are the 3 trends I wanted to talk about. Let's now move to the Gadget AI section of today's podcast. And here I wanted to highlight Google announced a small language model called SLM, called the Gemma model. And that is interesting because it will run on local computers with 16 gigs of RAM or less. This business of local models is something I've written a lot about. It's a big thing for AI, especially over the next 3 or 4 years, as a lot of the compute, especially for inference tokens, etc., moves to local devices, both for better privacy and trust issues of local data and more efficiency, meter-less computing. That is the promise here. So that instead of paying the a la carte pricing on cloud-based models, that local models, when they do these helpful things with AI, they're going to be meterless. Jensen Huang talked a lot about this when he introduced his Spark DGX chip partnership with Microsoft, which I wrote about a couple of days ago. So you should take a look at that. But this, along with Apple's move to use iPhone chips with 8 gigs of RAM on their new MacBook Neo, is a trend that is going to be important in the AI gadget space. We're going to see a flood of Windows laptops now that are going to run on 8 and 16 gigs. I talked about Dell having their XPS 13 now at $600 with 8 gigs of RAM running Windows, which I think is a bit too aspirational. But I wanted to highlight this business of small language models running on 16 gigs or less of RAM, which I think is the new thing to watch. It's not going to create magical results in the next year, but in the next 2 or 3 years, it should start to move the needle because we're talking about hundreds of millions of units of laptops. And then if you then spill it over to smartphones, et cetera, we're now talking a force that could have a bit of a dent impact on the loads on AI data centers in the cloud. So that balance thing I've talked about for years here on AI-RTZ, but it's an important trend. And this new Google Gemma model was a reason to talk about it, which takes me to our 2 questions of the day. One question is, well, Michael, since you're talking about SLMs, what's your favorite local SLM AI application? And right now, there aren't that many mainstream applications. There are some here and there in terms of running apps and things like that. But the one I would point to is Apple Intelligence is probably the closest. Apple runs a lot of small models, very discrete. Some of them are open source, some of them are not, but they run this. And you're going to see more of this at the WWDC conference when they announce their AI-inspired Siri with Google Gemini next Monday. And so that is one category of local apps that I would highlight. And then on the Google Android smartphone side, I'll highlight things like Gemini Nano, which is a very efficient model to run locally with your data privacy in mind. So we're going to see a lot more, not just Google and Apple, but also what NVIDIA is doing with Microsoft and a whole bunch of others to come. So, but right now, those would be the 2 that I would point to. So there's a lot more to go front and center. The next question is, what is my most wished for local SLM AI application? And here, it's going to be a little bit geeky. I would say it's likely iPhone and Android phones that can process screenshots. I take screenshots of everything around me every day, and I have for years. So I have over half my 100,000 photos in my photo gallery libraries are screenshots, everything that catches my attention. I would love local models that basically analyze this continuously because that's what's capturing my interest. I'll take pictures of articles, papers, etc. Yeah, I wanted to process all the text, the links, create my own database of things I'm interested in, and build a proactive AI agent set of applications that run around this. And that's what I would think would be automagical, as in when that happens. I think we will see more of this in the next year or 2. And that's my wish for SLM application. So I hope you find all that interesting. Today's AI-RTZ article 11.7, I'll have it in the links, is about Meta trying a whole bunch of mix of AI agent services for consumers and businesses. It's their attempt to kind of compete with Anthropic and OpenAI in enterprise. I've talked a lot about this over the last couple of years. Meta's finally focused on this with its MSL properties, and so you're going to see more of that. There's a lot of moving parts with their Muse Spark AI and their Hatch AI agents, and they're trying a lot of things. They're throwing a lot of things up against the wall, and it's an interesting discussion. If you're a Meta user, you're one of 3.5 billion people who use Meta WhatsApp or Facebook, Instagram, you're going to see a lot of these things in front of you. So welcome back tomorrow, of course, for ARD 91 and 1108 on the reset to 0. And of course, it'll be Friday. Thanks for joining us today, AI Curious Folk, and stay tuned.